Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the Cameron Art Museum. I know a lot of you are already here. It's good to see you back in this space. We're excited to have you tonight for our conversation with Dr. Valerie Johnson and Stephen Hayes. But we're really excited to have everyone here today. This is a very special talk for us. One, because we couldn't have this exhibition here without the foundation that was set by Boundless outside. So we're always grateful and happy when Stephen is back in this part of North Carolina with us. He's really busy, he's everywhere. He really is everywhere all the time now, so it's special whenever you come back down here, so thank you. So I'm just gonna start off by introducing our two today. And I'll start with Stephen Hayes, because he's already left. So Stephen is a North Carolina born artist from Durham, North Carolina, and graduated Central and Savannah School of Art and Design. Currently teaches at Duke University. His big kind of seminal project was Cash Crop, which was his masterpieces at SCAD, and has been traveling and exhibiting for nearly a decade. In his work, Hayes uses three symbols, a palm, a corn, and a horse to explore America's use or misuse of Black bodies, Black minds, and Black labor. Artists, he believes, are as much translators as they are creators. He started teaching at the college level in 2011. And as I mentioned before, currently he's an assistant professor of the practice of art history, and visual studies at Duke University. Recently, he finished a residency at Black Rock in Senegal with Kehinde Wiley in January 2023. He will be unveiling the Anson African Burial Memorial Fountain as a tribute to 36 people interred in the 1700s in a burial plot at today's Charleston Galliard Center in February 2024, and work for the Equal Justice Initiative Museum in June 2024. Stephen continues to create and exhibit artwork publicly and privately. So thanks for being here, Stephen.
Thank you.
Last but not least, we have Dr. Valerie Ann Johnson. She is the Dean of the School of Arts, Sciences, and Humanities at Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Before coming to Shaw University, Dr. Johnson was the Mott Distinguished Professor of Women's Studies and Director of Africana Women's Studies at Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. Dr. Johnson holds a PhD in Medical Anthropology from the University of California, Berkeley in San Francisco. Master's in Sociology from Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta University, and a Bachelor's in Sociology from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. Her research interests include gender, bioethics, disability, the health of women and girls, environmental humanities, and environmental justice. So let's welcome them one more time. So to start, I actually just want you all to talk a little bit about your upbringing. How did you get into your career? What drove you to study what you did?
Oh, when you say upbringing, how far back you took?
You can start at the beginning.
Oh gosh. Okay. I was a kid that used to collect a lot of rocks and sticks and stuff as a child. Around second grade, my mom bought me a workbench with real tools. So I had, box cutters and glue and all that kind of stuff, and hammers and nails in my bedroom. So I got that for a second grade Christmas. I guess what sparked it was I broke a toy. It was a remote control car. My brother took that car apart and found a motor in it, connected it to a 9-volt battery, and I was like, oh my God, I can break every toy I have in my bedroom and make brand new toys. So that's what started everything. I think my mom sent it right on the walls. And, I was a kid, it was hard for me to learn. Reading and stuff was hard, but physically making things were like easy to me. Legos were the key. So I did that. I failed a couple of classes, a grade, and then ended up able to skip a grade. So ended up going to North Carolina Central University, thinking that I was going to transfer to NC State for mechanical engineering because I love machines. I wanted to make stuff move and go. walking back to the dorm one day with one of my friends at Central. He was showing me what he was working on in classes. And it was art, type of art. I was like, oh man, you doing art? And he was like, no, it's not art. My major's graphic design. And I was just like, oh, okay. I was thinking in my head, it's still art. Like, what department is it? And he told me where to go. And I went and sat down with the chair the next day and I was like, hey, I want to major graphic design. And he was like, well, all the students think that art is easy and it's gonna be easy. And I sat back in my chair and I looked at them and I laughed. I was like, man, I've been doing this all my life. And I want to be my major graphic design. So I did that. And every day I was there in the studio making stuff. I took advantage of everything to the point where they allowed me to stay there and throw pots and make pots when the janitor was in there coming to clean up. And one of the professors saw my work, and she took photos of all my work. She came to my house and built a portfolio for me. Got me my first residency at Alfred University, which is one of the largest ceramics colleges in the States. So, when I was there throwing pots and making stuff, she was like, some artists call this art. And it was like the remnants of trash, and I was just throwing it over, like, that's trash. And I laughed at her when she said that. I was just like, how? Because I wasn't from I didn't have an art background when I was thinking about history and artists and what they're doing. I didn't go to museums and stuff like that to study artists. So I didn't know anything about the concept, the content behind artwork. So then I went to, ended up going to SCAD after I graduated. I didn't have any path. I graduated in 2006 from North Carolina Central. And my aunt was like, why don't you apply to SCAD? Your little cousin's going there, And at that point in time, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm gonna do the rest of my life. So I didn't plan anything out. I just graduated, so why not? So I applied and found out I got in, and I didn't know how to talk about art. It was hard for me. I felt like I was riding on a C or a D the whole time through grad school. And just because I didn't know how to talk about my artwork, and it was a predominantly white school, so I didn't know how to communicate with everybody, with my classmates. I didn't have any African American professors, and I felt like they kept pushing me to do stuff about being black. But at that time, I was doing abstract stuff, pottery and everything like that. And I didn't know how to talk about the work. And I kept telling the teachers, I want to create artwork that's going to wow my audience and attract them to it from afar, and then create the content with them back and forth. And then, so one teacher was like, okay, then wow me. And I was like, okay, bet, let's do it. And that's when I came up with the concept behind cash crop, and not knowing about the transport of people from Africa to America. Finding us estimating 15 million people were transported from Africa to America, and not learning that history. They go into all other histories, the Civil War and all these presidents and everything else, but they don't go into the number of ships they took to transport 15 million people, or what happened on these ships. So I made 15 life-size bodies. One representing each million. I trained them all to a pallet, and the pallet represents today and how we outsource our goods to sweatshops in third world countries and places that don't have child labor laws. And then I landed the biggest gallery in Atlanta at that time, and they gave me the main floor. It's the first time they ever gave a student the main floor at this gallery. At that time, there was galleries named Mason Mirror. Now it's Mason Fine Art. So that opened up in 2010. Second week it came out. It took me 5 months to make that piece, by the way. I was working day and night. I always say I don't have 24 hours in my day like everybody else does. I have more like 36 in a day. It came out the second week, it went on CNN. And then from there, I've just been showing since 2010 in different places and building a lot of different artwork for different things.
Dr. Johnson, a little bit about your upbringing.
I have a slightly different kind of upbringing. My parents were Southerners. My mother is from Atlanta, Georgia, and my father is from Bessemer, Alabama, but he didn't claim it. And as soon as he could get out of Alabama, he did. And they ended up in San Diego, California. And so I'm born and raised in San Diego, but was Southern Southerners as parents, so I have this certain kind of sensibility about the South. I know you asked, what did it feel like coming and living in North Carolina after being raised out west? Well, that's the anthropologist in me. And the anthropologist is curious about how humans live wherever they live. And so it might have sounded from the bio that I was interested in all these different kinds of things, but they tie themselves together in the sense that the niche we make for ourselves tells us about who we are, who we aspire to be. Sometimes it also says something about who we want to forget, what we want to forget. And so I thought about this question of, where did you come from? And I think of kind of many places, even though I had that first experience in San Diego. And Mommy was interesting. Mommy planted seeds in us, and she didn't know what was going to happen. And this is what she did. We were blessed to be middle class, and so we would go to museums. That's why I say a little different. She would take us to Balboa Park, and there was the Museum of Man. And this is why I'm saying seeds. I didn't know I was going to be an anthropologist, but I would spend my time in the Museum of Man. My sister would be in the Museum of Art, and she ended up being an artist and was in Atlanta and got her degree from Spelman as well. And so we kind of paid attention to our history, the kind of legacy that we were following, that there's something about the art department at Spelman College at the time that my sister was there that tied back to Woodruff. And I was curious about art, just why are we doing these things? How are we doing? And what does it mean? So part of my upbringing had to do with that visual component. The other part had to do with me loving poetry and writing poetry. Not necessarily publishing it, but just really writing it. I had, though, one of those experiences, and it stayed with me for a lifetime. 4th grade, Mrs. Vanover. Oh, it was tough because I was one of the only black children in the school. And they did not really understand that I had, gifts and skills. And so I was one of those probably busy little children in the classroom that when I got through with my work, I was chattering. And I can remember writing all of these haiku poems because we were going to have parents come in and you had open house and your poems were going to be on the wall. Well, there's this other girl named Alicia who ended up transferring into the classroom, and she was black. She wouldn't do anything. She was very sullen, and I didn't understand what that meant. And I walk in to that room, and I want to show, I'm excited, I'm showing my parents my poetry. And Mrs. Vanover had attributed the poem that I loved the most to Alicia because she refused to write anything, and she wanted her to have something on the wall. And that cut me to the quick. It silenced me in a different kind of way. I said, I'm not paying attention to what they're doing. I'm gonna go read in the library and learn my own stuff. And that sense of theft and appropriation, I didn't have those SAT words, but I did know the feeling of that. And so when I also look at art, I look at how do we claim things for ourselves, but at the same time respect the influences that come to us from various places. So that's kind of an overview of my perspective on life.
Now I'm curious, because Stephen, you've been in the South most of your life, correct?
Correct.
Now, you being in California until you came to Spelman in Atlanta, and I know you were raised by Southerners, but before you came over here, just what was your overall perception of the South?
When I got to Atlanta, I said, oh, there's a lot of black people. But this was as a child, because they did bring us to visit relatives, but I can remember just wondering, where are these people coming from? And Atlanta was also bigger than San Diego. So it was a lot of people, a lot of black folk, and there were the trees. Now, San Diego is really a semi-arid desert, kind of Mediterranean. It really is a desert, and we have to import our water in. So when I saw my auntie's house with trees in her backyard, I thought she lived in the woods. And I was expecting all kinds of things. So my concept of the South was, I was unsettled. Even though I had had some experiences, when I got to Spelman, I was unsettled because I wasn't sure how to be. You know, here I am, this kind of California girl, and folk had particular cultural ways of being black. And so I had to figure out, how did that all work together and still retain my sense of myself as a Westerner, but still with these Southern, deep Southern roots.
Now, Stephen, you being from the South and growing up in the South, I know a lot of your work today almost serves as a counterpoint to the statues and monuments we see around our environments and communities. Now, you being from the South, did you get this kind of conviction in you to change that narrative from being born here and seeing how black bodies were presented in this space, or the lack thereof?
Yeah, because I grew up mainly with, I went to a little private school where it was mostly white kids, and I was either the oldest black student or one of the only black students in the classroom. And, we didn't learn about that African-American history and stuff. And then, if I even dressed up to go to school with a dress clothes, they think, hey, you going to court? What's wrong with you? So just trying to figure out how do I create this narrative where, just because what you see on television is not what I actually am. But not even just growing up in the South, my best friend's a white guy. We travel around the world. We see the world with each other. I mean, we can be open AVs and running with the bulls. But no matter where I go in the world, even if I'm in the club with him, and I'm almost the only black person in the club, somebody will come to me like, hey, what's up, Snoop Dogg? Or try and give me a high five just because I'm the only black person. So it's just like, why? Or, they say, like, you look like this person when they come to me asking to buy drugs from me. Just because they see a black man with dreads, they think that's what he does. And that's nothing that I've done ever in my life. So the world predicts me to be a certain type of way because of the way I look. So I want to use my artwork as a way to stop people from thinking that this is what I am or what somebody looks like me is doing. So it's just basically like lessons that I learned throughout my lifetime that I want to put in the artwork, but then connect people across generations and multicultural.
I think as I look at your various work, it opens up, for me, that conversation, that entree into finding out more about what is really U.S. history. It's, what has happened, and also showing the beauty of these faces. I keep looking back at your piece, and it's the dignity that I see that oftentimes is not reflected in television, early television. You didn't see that dignity. The minstrels, it was a performance that wasn't really about reality, but it was entertainment. And so these are counter to that minstrelly. I don't know if the audience, if you are aware of Ethnic Notions. It was a film back in the 80s that Marlon Riggs created based on those stereotyped images and unpacking what they are. And it was a catalog that came with the film because there was a collector, and she would go, black woman would collect all of these images, the little mammy figurines and all of those things that I can remember not ever having in my house. I can remember when I sent for flags from every state, and I was putting them on my wall. And I got the one from Georgia, and I was like real excited. And of course it has the stars and bars. My mom got so upset, and I didn't know, I was 8, and I didn't understand really why, just a simple flag. And so she had to sit down and explain to me what this flag meant. Good thing she did, because when I got into middle school or junior high school, we had folks who were Julian out in the county, San Diego County. It turns out that Southern California supported the Confederacy, and they had gold, and they were mining gold. And so the places that you would see the Confederate flag in my county were places that were not going to be safe. And so knowing that history, knowing the story, helped me understand that. But I got it not from any school books, not from anything, but from my mom's reaction to something that I thought was real simple. You know, putting the flag of her state on the wall.
And that's your parents taking it upon themselves to inform you, but I guess I want to know, as both of you are now educators, how do you take these things that shaped your childhood and even your early adulthood that drove you into your career? When you're teaching this next generation, when you think about the students that come in your class, you're a dean, so you have more control over the department, really. What are the steps you take to make sure that kids growing up don't have the same understanding that y'all did, as in they learn from an earlier point on what these things are?
Well, actually, the faculty, the teachers, can have that kind of control. When I was in the classroom, every time that I would talk about something, I made sure to talk about from different perspectives, and to bring in the stories, the narratives. I would bring in novels, because humanities and social science, and I would bring in the work of Black writers, Black authors, Latinx writers, authors, sociologists, anthropologists, deliberately and intentional, in just as a matter of course, not making a big deal of it, but this is just part of your learning. This is part of understanding, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. You've got to go out and then find more of this information, but if you can get them excited about something, like for me, that part of the exhibit there from the Equal Justice Initiative can really excite young people. Dirt? What is this about this dirt? And then you start unpacking what that means. So it's not just the books, but it's experiences. You gotta get them out and about. Like, you've got a gold mine with Boundless. Because there's a visual that goes and resonates with the young people. And you've got to touch that, because there's a lot of clutter that they are exposed to. So you have to kind of work with it and help them think critically about their world, which is what, to me, art does.
I'm gonna have to say ditto. I like to have my students bring in their why and understand who they are as a person, because they come from all different walks of life. I'm just teaching sculpture, but I think it's important for them to understand who they are as a person, and also see other artists who are doing the same thing. So I'll introduce them to other artists who are kind of doing what they want to do. Even though, most of the time that's with the grad students, but undergrad students, they come in from different, it's not like a major in sculpture. So they just come in from biology and all this stuff. So I'll tell them who I am, what I do, and why I create what I create. But then I give them other little things, little tasks to work on. But I still ask them, who are you? How do we put you inside of your piece of artwork that you created this semester? And at the end of the day, I want them to be happy with what they have. Not just to create something just for a grade, but to create something that they're happy with that they did for themselves. I don't want them to just make something and just throw it away just because they do it for the project. But I want them to be happy at the end of the day, so they can go on further. Especially with my grad students, when I made cash crop, I didn't know what Schwarzer did. So I want to push them to make something that they can be happy with and probably be able to travel later on down in life, or spark the next idea of what they created. Because at the end of the day, they're creating their own voice, and so I'm introducing them to their why. and trying to understand who they are as a person. That's my main goal.
I wanted to ask a question. Do you go on excursions? Like, do you take them out of the classroom too to help get them to that why?
So we only meet like once a week,
Oh.
and it's only for like an hour and some change. Like almost 2 hours, so we don't really have time to go out on excursions. But like, if I had a show, they would charter a bus, and we would go to the shows and stuff. Like we also would probably end up chartering a bus next year to see these other statues we turn into bronze. So just learning processes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only time we really get to go out. And I set different tasks for them to go and see certain things. But,
No, but that's part of it too, to me, the experiential component.
No, I was going to ask, because you said it's important to show the students different perspectives, and how we even have a goal of bringing students and adults alike here to see something like Boundless. But I even think about Boundless, and it's such a masculine statue, and monuments typically are male-dominated spaces. And as someone who's studied built environments and studied, or women's studies in particular, what do you think comes next with making sure that we honor and our statues and communities represent all people? Because we have about an even split, of course, between the sexes, male and female, right? But if you were to look at the most recent monument audit, out of our 50 most frequently used figures in monuments, 3 of them are women. So with your work, have you seen an uptick in women monuments? Have you seen more?
I would say I know of women artists. One that comes directly to my mind is Vinnie Bagwell. And she does sculpture too. And a lot of her installations do feature women, and different women besides Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. And I think it's because of not knowing the stories, and then getting interested in the other narratives that are out there, the other stories. Like I noticed Harriet Jacobs in the piece that's back at the back of the room, the flag. And so there's talk about, making statuary for Harriet Jacobs. I think that for me, it goes with what moves the artist to create the thing that they want to be remembered. And so it is also supporting those artists. I think the commissions, when folk commission work, they've got to be more open to accepting the different ways in which folk express. And I know that there's an effort to do that, but if your panel is primarily white and upper class, you're not going to get the input that's needed to know where these people are and where they're doing their work, because it's not just the ones that are well known, like a Carl Walker, but there are so many artists that are they're doing their work, and they don't really expect to be, you didn't expect to blow up, did you? You just did your work.
I just love to make. That's all I wanted to do.
And so it's important to open up more and more of those avenues. This is an example of what can happen. And so the challenge is finding those artists who represent the stories that haven't been told and they're not familiar. And that means going to some more of the women, but it doesn't have to be a woman who represents women. You know that, so.
Now, Stephen, I know you do a lot of commission work. Has anyone ever approached you about doing a work that focuses on a historical female figure?
Yes. Currently, we'll be working on one in Smyrna, Georgia. Got a woman's name that we're working on, but there's a commission we're working on with another artist that's going to be happening in Smyrna, Georgia. Yeah. Yes, women.
So, Dr. Johnson, with a lot of the work you've been doing, the research you've been doing, we're at this pivotal point in time where we're starting to see monuments come down, but we still have a long ways to go. Now, where you sit in this middle ground doing research of it, but also being an educator, what needs to be paired with the pulling down of these statues, education-wise? You know, we never want to just have an out of sight, out of mind perspective on these things, because we need to have that information readily available, so we can learn why they were up, why they came down in the first place. What needs to be paired with?
Well, that's my other hat, sitting on the North Carolina Historical Commission. So I was a part of the discussion around the monuments that were around the state capitol, the Confederate monuments around the state capitol, the old state capitol building. And for me, it's not erasing the history, but it is making a context to better understand what that history was. That these monuments were created at a time post-Civil War to inspire terror, to put people in their place, to oppress. It wasn't, part of it was to honor, but honor in a particular way, a singular story. And that part doesn't always, is not fully discussed if you don't include, well, why are folks so resistant to the monuments? Why are they upset about them? Some of them were very poorly made. They were not very aesthetically pleasing, in my opinion. They were made from poor materials. They were done for a particular kind of purpose. So once you understand the purpose of the various monuments, where they go, I think that if that's the only thing in your public spaces, then it shuts down everyone else who doesn't have that story, who doesn't have that history. So what are you going to do with that? How do you make a more open public space if you have that one kind of story? And the same thing with, I think, over-militarization of many of our sites. And it's you know, you want to balance, because I respect the fact that we've got a series of veterans. And on the eve of Veterans Day, it's really important to acknowledge that. But what is also part of that story? What happened at home that supported the soldiers being away? How do we talk about war in a way that is serious and important, that does respect what happened, and that I'm very clear that factual information needs to be there. But the myth-making is the part that needs to be dismantled. And when you do that, it is a constant conversation, because we are constantly changing as humans. And that's the part of the give and take of these kinds of statues and monuments.
No, Stephen, are you thinking about the statues that are being torn down and you're creating your new pieces, or are you just creating what's important to you because you feel like that's your story that needs to be told?
Both, kind of. But I think it's important to think about what, for like new statues or the ones that we're taking down, what is the conversation that, for me when I'm creating, what is the conversation that Boundless will have with these other statues? You know, if you have artists like, okay, so how can we create something to have a conversation with that Confederate statue? And what would it say, or what would my statue say to another statue? You know, what is the content between the two? You know, I guess what my goal when I was making Boundless was like, I want to put it on the ground. I didn't want it on a pedestal, you know, like those monuments on a pedestal looking down, like you'll never be able to live up to this. But I want to put my statues on the ground so people can see this eye to eye and say, we're going to live up to this, we're going to be better than you. But when it comes to make it for me, it's more about like what I'm trying to say and connecting people and trying to create a certain content about, you know, not just being a part of it, but a king, and being more than what the world predicts me to be.
One of the coolest parts about, I guess, when you were working on balancing these conceptual stages is to put it on the ground. Because when I think about Confederate statues, they are on these raised positionings. They're 10, 15 feet in the sky. And you're right, it's almost like this looming eyes over you, looking at everything you're doing. Yeah. But it's special to walk up to Boundless and look them in the eyes, see them on the ground level where they actually marched and fought and died. And it kind of puts you on the same level as them, that anything they could do, you could do. Exactly. to do more because of what they've done. It makes them equals. I mean, we put them on pedestals in our mind. We hold them in high regards and we honor them, but it's more encouraging.
It's on a human level.
Yeah. Now, for your new pieces that you're making, spaces, where do we put them? Are they mainly for museums? Do we need to flood our publics, parks, and spaces and statues? Where's the first place these stories should go, where they can reach the large audience?
And they go anywhere. I'm happy for them to go to have any home. So museums, I take cash app, I take them to also. But I'm happy for the work to go anywhere, just to create these conversations. So, I like to say I make museum quality work. Some of it's going to be hanging in a museum. But I love working big. So 9 times out of 10 it's going to be shown in a museum or some huge space. But yeah, I would love for the work to go anywhere that's going to create a conversation and create, some kind of understanding between people and open conversations about stories that are not being had and will never be told.
And I think that it's important to think broadly about what we memorialize and what we call a monument. I mean, if you think of it in only one kind of way, then you do get the repetition of the same thing over and over again. But when you bust that mold out, like you said, bring them off the pedestal, put them on the ground, then it gets you thinking about, well, what does this ground mean? What is this place? And I think that goes back to my love of preservation. Are these places that tell these stories? And so for me, a monument is something like Esty Hall at Shaw University, because it was the first dormitory that was built for Black women in the country, and it was built in 1873 for young women coming to get higher education. And I always like to say it was built, the women were coming to Shaw University before women were allowed to go and matriculate at UNC Chapel Hill by many years. And so that building that exists that's 150 years old today is a kind of monument, but it's a living monument because we use it. And I think there's an interaction that happens with your work that people are not gonna necessarily use it, but I know little people who go home now are gonna feel it and touch it. There's a similar kind of experience in Newark with the Harriet Tubman installation that they just opened up. And that gives that kind of kinetic feeling of we're not just idolizing this person, but this person is a part of us.
Well, that leads me to ask, these monuments, these statues that don't accurately represent us today, what do we do with them? Do we just tear them down? Do we ban them? Do we put them in museums with proper context? What's their best use today?
I think I'll go with who lays claim to the thing. I think that if it goes into a private place, that's fine. I just have an issue with these kinds of representations in our public spaces where we all contribute. I'm not particularly fond of them, so I'm not really excited about where they go. But there are other people who may have real feelings about them, and they can take them and put them there. That's my true feeling. I mean, I'm sure that we don't love all the art that we see, and we have conversation maybe with ourselves about why you like it, why you don't like it. But I think things that were built to inspire terror should just not, and I don't mean Halloween stuff, I mean that was really about oppressing a people at a particular time, don't belong in the public venue, period.
I'm not gonna say ditto, but yeah, I don't care where they go either. But I also think about like I said before, what would the conversation be if there was another statue facing them, or maybe they're all in a box somewhere, and there's other statues that represent what really happened, or anything about people in general who fought for our freedom. You know, I don't know how to answer that question, but I don't care where they go, but just think about what other conversations can we create with these works. Because at the end of the day, you know, artists here to create these conversations that are going on today. So, I mean, I'm sure there's artists out here that could create something that's going to say, all right, this is what this was about, the oppression of African American people. But this is the art that I'm creating here that's going to have this conversation and saying, like, why this was wrong, or, you know, what actually really happened, you know, and who should be on this pedestal versus that.
So you think proper context could help them? Because there's another stat from this monument audit. There's over 4,000 Confederate statues, and there's many of them, but only 3 of them mention defeat.
I think there's a lesson that could be learned, that can be taught and with this work, with it. So there's bigger conversations around this than just take it down and disappear, but there's stuff that can be happening that can still talk about conversations that need to be had.
And my other idea about this is that also they're used as touchstones to incite further violence. And so that has to be a part of the reckoning of what we do with these things. They're not just, they're not neutral, they're not just telling a particular story, they're also used to ramp folk up, to remind them of a particular mythology. And so that's why, and these are all over the world, that there are these kinds of ways in which people want to remember how they can be superior and really oppress violently other people. And they, to me, don't have a place because they do create that kind of synergy. If you can have a conversation, then I'm willing to entertain that, but not if it's going to help people be more violent. No.
Now, I do want to open up the floor to some questions, because I don't want to be the only one asking the questions up here, because I know that there might be something floating around in the audience's head. And so we do have about 15 minutes left, so I'm actually going to turn it over to you all. They can be questions, they can be comments, you can just engage with.
I have a question for Steve. Is it Stephen? Yes. Could you speak of your actual Boundless sculpture and how you chose the incredibly beautiful faces on your sculpture that express all this struggle and whatever you decided to do with that. I want to know how you decided to put those expressions on faces, if you would.
So she asked, how did I choose the people that I chose to create Boundless, and how did I get the expressions on their faces? Right?
Yes.
All right. So I was approached by Cam, and they told me that they were on the grounds where the Cultural USCT marched on, and they wanted to apply for a grant, and if I could come up with a couple of sketches and ideas so we can apply for this grant for Z. Smith Reynolds. And I said yes. And they invited me here to see the reenactors, and they come every year and they reenact. They stay here for a couple of days. They're out on the grounds. And I was invited to meet the guys and meet all the men. And I walked the grounds with them. I learned about the boots and how the boots were interchangeable when they marched. So I was tasked with coming up with a sketch. I created a sketch and we applied for the grant. And they said, hey, if we get the grant, we want you to make it. I was like, all right, cool. So we got the grant, and what happened? They said, hey, let's come up with a couple more ideas. So then I was like, all right, let's come up with some more ideas. So I was like, hey, well, let me cast descendants and reenactors of the USCT here. And I gave them the task to find all the descendants and all the reenactors to be a part of this statue. Because I didn't just want to make just random faces. I wanted to tie everyday person into this. Like, that's why I use all of my artwork is tying in everyday people into the work. So I came in on, I think, a Saturday morning around like 7:30, and they had, I think, like 18 people come through, and I casted about 18 people faces. That's how I got all of my volunteers. So Cam went out and they found descendants and reenactors. So from 7:30 to about 8:39, I was in there casting people's faces. And that's how I got their expressions and their faces. So however the person said is how the bowl ended up coming out. I think also me doing that was more of I wanted people who were descendants of reenactors because I wanted them to be able to tell that story. Them telling that story to their grandkids and great-grandkids is going to always come back later on down the line. Their great-grandkids going to be my age at one point in time. And they're going to be like, hey, that's your great-granddaddy telling their kids that. And he is depicting the color troops that marched here and fought for our freedom. So basically trying to create this timeless piece of artwork that's going to keep telling this story over and over.
This question is for Dr. Johnson. So a strange question, because my first teaching job, I got my doctorate was at Spelman. So I'm trying to figure out whether you were one of my students. The other thing I just was really very wonderful to hear you talk about Spelman and the art department of Spelman. And I'm really loving and the English department. Those are two departments that I love about Spelman. And there was some great people in this book. Really, I can see how you got your wealth of art coming out of Spelman. Let's move on.
Thank you.
It's an easy question. Well, before we slow down, we were talking about what people think of the tension between trying to get authentic cultural representation and still trying to be true to your artistic spirit. And so I thought you gave a great example in the cash crop, and I wish you talked about that. And that it didn't work too, because I think what you give people is when they look at your work, all the work they really have to focus on the things that are sometimes very subtle, where the artist putting in his own special touch.
Okay. So he was asking about the tension between being an artist and trying to, I forgot what the last word was, but I got the answer for him. Because we discussed it earlier. So when I made Cash Crop, it was about learning about the transport of people and the transport of goods from the past and the present. And I guess my struggle when I was making it was, do I make the shackles to look like the real shackles that was on the people at that point in time? And I didn't. I made the shackles out of railroad track ties, which is also bringing in the history of transport of goods from one place to another. So I guess my thing is, I'm trying to bring in, I'm folding in all these different histories, all these different meanings into a lot of my artwork. There's a bunch of layers that are in the work that, people wouldn't know unless they asked me, why'd you do this and why'd you do that? But I'm always folding in all these different layers into my artwork, but then also trying to be happy with myself and not trying to be like everyone else and all the other artists that are out there.
If everyone didn't hear his question, yes, the difference between a monument or a memorial. What makes something a monument? What makes something a memorial? Did I get that correct?
Well, for me, the memorial is more intimate. They tend to really kind of invoke your memory of a thing, and also something that has been told to you or something that has been experienced by people. They're quite similar, but a monument to me is something that is it's not as ephemeral as a memorial, in my opinion. A monument is made to be the definitive statement about a thing that lasts forever and ever. And in between those things, to me, is where you get these various kinds of pieces. Like, there are pieces art pieces that stand, I would never want them to ever go, because they tell us something about ourselves. And what I wanted to say with you, with layering, is that for me, some monuments are just one note. But when you get an artistic piece where there's this thoughtfulness, there are these layers. And so you can go back to that same piece over the course of your lifetime and see something different and have some other experience. But for me, when I see certain monuments, that's it. There's nothing else that's there but that thing and that thing that's being told. So that's how I think of the difference between the two.
Well, that makes me want to ask you, Stephen, how do you see Boundless? Is it a monument or a memorial?
I mean, I want to say both because, it is creating this intimate space, this intimate setting, but then it's also talking about this overall thing that happened here in this location. So I want to say both, but I want to say more monument than both. I mean, we're still creating this intimate space, intimate setting, but it's that history that is really talking about, that's not being told. So I'm pulling for monument on the end.
Stephen, you mentioned that a teacher challenged you to say wow me. Okay, that part excites me because I want to ask you, how do you challenge your students to wow you?
Oh man, in my classroom, I'm not the normal teacher. I go in there and I talk trash to them. I don't really talk super trash to them, but I tell them, hey, you're not gonna get no A out of me. No, that does not look good. Even though it looks good in my head, like, no, that's terrible. Right? So I try to push them to work a little harder. I don't want them to come in and be like, oh, okay, this is gonna be it. Like, when the teacher told me, hey, everybody think this is art, you're gonna get an easy A out of this. And I'll tell them, no, you're not going to. This does not impress me at all. Like, you gotta come a little harder. But I let them know that they can talk to me about anything. When I was in grad school, I felt like I couldn't talk to my professors. I didn't know how to talk to them. I was the first person to go to finish college in my family, first person to get a master's in my family. So, I didn't know how to communicate with these people. But I try to let my students know, hey, you can speak to me not any way, but don't be afraid to approach me so I can help you learn what you need to learn and help you get what you need to get. But I'm always pushing them to go a little further. I really only got to be in the classroom or they're in the classroom about 6 hours a week. But I still treat it like a 9 to 5. I'm there from 9 o'clock in the morning to 5:30 in the afternoon every day. And I let my students know you can come in anytime. If you come in here, I'm gonna help you get the work done. We're gonna make sure that you're happy about the work you're producing. But they don't really show up sometimes. But I still, when they come in, I'm like, hey, you could have came in. So, but I'm there every day. I treat it like a 9 to 5. And I allow them to come in and do work whenever they need to do work. I have one that says, hey, I want to come in. I mean, you're there during the break, during Thanksgiving break. Yes, I'm here. I'm still going to be here because I got to create. I'm still creating my work. If you want to come in during Thanksgiving break, come on in. I'm still going to help you. So I'm always there for all of my students. Like even students that I taught 6 or 7 years ago, they'll call me and they'll be like, hey, how you doing? Like, can I come over and talk to you about what what I'm doing? And I'm there for them all the time. So yeah, I love my students. Like the professor came and took photos of my artwork. I wanted to like mirror what she did for me, for them.
I was just going to ask, what do you think is, like, what is your opinion on public interaction with monuments and memorials, specifically ones that ask for the public to interact with space?
So what?
Like, when you create an art piece or you're going to travel to a memorial or a monument, when you're walking up and the monument is asking you to do something, whether it be take a piece of it with you or to add something to it, what is your thought process and opinion on that?
I think that's all on the artist. Like, what's the artist's, opinion, what they want their artwork to be. For me, when it comes to making like a public piece of artwork, you don't know what the public is going to do to it. You don't know if they're going to climb on it or whatever they're going to do to it. So I don't think about what they're going to do because it's unpredictable what somebody is going to do to the work. But I don't ask the public to take something from the piece. But it all depends on the artist, the person who's creating the work.
So there may be some works that are kind of co-created that the artist thinks, okay, I'm creating this thing so that people can interact and actually do what you said. But then there are other pieces that is not a physical interaction necessarily, but an intellectual, emotional interaction that they're hoping that happens. And so that's how I kind of see what can happen.
I got it.
Yes.
When I created this piece right here, it's not a monument or anything, but a piece called Kairos. My goal was to allow my audience to do it. Now that it's in a museum setting, you can't touch it, but I was allowing my audience to touch these hands. And in return, with them touching these hands, they were able to turn this sculpture. And the oils from their skin would then transfer to this piece. And then it would end up staining these fists. And then this hand, turning it would make this loud, grungy noise. I don't know, Heather, do you want to turn it one time for me?
Okay, then ask you guys about some of you. Close your eyes. A lot of people, and it was one thing that Anna used to talk about, how it sounds like the interior of the whole of the ship, perhaps one of the ships. And then the
So y'all was allowing people to do that. And then basically later on down the line, those white fists end up getting really stained. It's talking about, you hear that, that saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You think about what are we fighting for, so those are one of those pieces that I think you were referring to.
Not to Nelson, you wanted to say something before we wrap up?
Yes, I do. Speaking of this Boundless being something living, and you're all going to be celebrating the descendants. Well, we've got Judge Hankins. Can you come up here? I'm putting her on the spot. No, come up. She didn't know I was going to do this. Judge Hankins is not only a descendant of one of the United States colored troop persons, she's part of the Gullah Geechee Corridor here. Roots are planted deep in this area, and she also serves with me on the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission. And I just wanted folk to see you and know this isn't just, it's right here, it's tangible, it is present. And so thank you. You want to say anything, Judge?
Again, good evening, everyone. I'm just so proud of my heritage. I'm just so glad to know that I'm a descendant, again, part of the Galakichi, currently serving as a district court judge in Brumsey County. I actually sit on the bench on land that my great-great-grandfather owned, who was a slave. Purchased the property after slavery ended. The county brought the property from my family, and now I sit as a judge on the bench.
This evening. And so I wanted to say thank you so much. And I do have another commissioner in the audience. Dr. Holmes Brothers, will you please stand? I think it's important to know we serve y'all as part of the promotion, protection of African American history for all, and heritage for all North Carolinians. And so that's what the commission is for. It's for y'all. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got one young lady who has to ask a question.
For Stephen, I wanted to ask about your purpose for your choice of color in metallics and why you don't use them.
And why I don't use color?
Yeah, no, when you don't use a lot of
color has always been like a hard thing for me. So I only stick to a few different colors that I really like. I think the green patina color is always one of those things I really like, that rusty looking color. I think it's all just perspective and like what I like. I'm not thinking about everybody else's like. I just like what I think is going to pop and catch attention. I stick away from the color red. So I always had to think about it, learning that, thinking like, if you can't make something red, you can't make something big and red, and it's going to capture people's attention because, you always see the color red stop sign. So I stick away from the color red. That's one of the things I always stay away from. But colors, I like the golds and those different metallics, but I also like the really rusty colors. I don't know what it says about why I use it, but I know that the golds is going to attract attention because people are attracted to gold. I don't know if y'all came here when I made those 5 pounds pieces, which was actually like bullet casings. And from afar, you look like it's gold. These hands are on this gold. But then when you get up close to it, it's telling a different story. So the gold is what's attracting people to it. And then it's going to create this content behind it. So I think it's all about like who I am as an artist. I don't really think about the color sometimes, but most of the time it's just what I think is going to pop and what I'm happy with seeing.
I want to thank everyone so much for coming out tonight.